Hey everyone, welcome back to another Build It or Bench It series. In this video we are going to talk about the Dorabella, Portia and Katrina. Very interesting heroes if I say so myself. So Dorabella is one of the better or even best EV heroes in the game. She is one of the oldest heroes in the game and she's basically the face of the game. So if you know the game, you basically know who Dorabella is. Now, what makes Dorabella so special? Her most special thing that makes her unique is her runes. So her runes say each time Dorabella deals damage to an enemy, the target loses an additional 1% of their max HP up to own attack times 10. This is one of the most unique rune skills in the game so far. Dorabella was one of the unique heroes that only one pretty much could push the Forgotten Lands, the third golem boss, because no other hero was able to deal as much damage as she did with her runes. Dorabella was basically what Pandora is right now. When you take her runes, she's basically what Pandora scales up to, and when you take her follow-ups on the, or rather the sync attacks on the basic attacks after ally crits, she's basically the Pandora in terms of multi-action. So Dorabella can still work even in some of the Rift Odyssey bosses, as well as any other boss that has insane amount of HP and requires a lot of follow-ups. Dorabella was also needed in the Rift Odyssey like 4 seasons ago or so she still didn't fall off and she's still a hero that you really do want to have in your pocket in case something tricky happens again. Her last passive is pretty useless, it's just the crit rate conversion into attack, which is pretty nice, but it doesn't really contribute to the battle that much, but it makes up considering her kit is all around spamming. So when Dorabella is deployed, she has 25% chance to start a sync attack after an ally lands a critical hit, and she applies 1 stack of defense reduction. Defense reduction is pretty old effect and it doesn't make much of a difference unless it's super late game PvE content. So this passive is really strong. I pushed Lost City back in the days up to 300 and even up to 500 with Dorabella. Dorabella was the primary carry that I used with a lot of ethereals around her. She's not a hero to be underestimated, she's a hero that might still get used even in the late game, even within the current age. So she's definitely not a benched hero because you will be using her both in PvP and PvE in your Omniheroes playthrough. Her ultimate scaling is pretty nice and her second skill scaling is pretty nice. She has a lot of defense reduction in her kit because that was one of the go-to things in the early stages of Omniheroes, but right now is pretty outdated. Her synergies ethereal is pretty nice. Dawnbringer fits her synergy or other fits her follow-ups real nice, because if you go to the runes you will see that every sync up attack she does has a 25% chance on uniques to stun an enemy. And then Monarchs, obviously one of the best rune synergies in the game bar none, and right now Dorabella is insanely good in the dimensional arena when paired with the newer Dorabella, because newer Dorabella makes everyone crit, which means the normal Dorabella will do a lot of sync attacks and actually burst down enemies, and she syncs up with the synergies of the new Dorabella. Dorabella is a really great hero both in the early, mid, even to late game. You will not be using her in the late game because of the obvious power creep, but she's still a hero that you can use in PvP. Not necessarily in the top hundreds of World Arena, for example, but if you do like heroes to fill in the synergies, you can absolutely use her in the PvP as well. So when it comes to unique runes, you will definitely want to run the DPS set because she does insane amounts of damages, especially with the follow-ups. It absolutely makes sense to run the DPS set. As you can see, the unique empire stat is to performing consecutive basic attack has 25% chance to apply stun for 1 round. So ideally you do want to have supreme runes on her because you will additionally gain the critical damage increased by 30% and additional 25% chance to apply the stun on the consecutive basic attacks. I didn't bother rolling for them, but I can afford it because I do have the stones, but it will take a lot of time to actually get there. So as for the substats, you will want the increase of Dorabella's basic attacks. Every single one of them should be increase of Dorabella's basic attacks. because that makes the most sense on her. You can also do attack if you're low on stones, it's completely fine, but basic attack is what's ideal on her. And as you can see, this makes perfect sense for her to be an Empire hero because she will do a lot of attacks and has a lot of chances to proc a stun on the enemy heroes. Will you be using Dorabella later? Yes, you will be using her in the Dawnbringer's Lost City trials because she's one of the rare heroes that actually does damage in that trial and will help you a lot because she's a monarch which pairs well with Pandora and Albert, who is also a Dawnbringer. So you will be using Dorabella in there quite a lot and she will help you push further. She might need legendary runes in the high stages of Lost City to make an impact or rather to deal damage, but by that stage you will probably end up having them. And that's really it about Dorabella, so definitely a hero you will not be benching for a while, if even ever. She's a really solid hero, overall fairly balanced and has her niche utility and usages. As of right now, do not bench her, use her whenever you can, upgrade her whenever you can, and she will serve you really well. She's also really good in the early game with Elisha, so that's about it for the Dorabella. Next up on the list we have Katrina. Katrina on release was the top tier hero in the game. She was better than most DD heroes and she was the closest hero to Navi. Navi was the best hero in the game for a while and she was absolutely worth it to spend Oracle coins on. So Katrina came really close to her and was pretty much a carry in the Ethereals because of her sustain. So after an ally lands a critical hit, Katrina applied shield effect equal to 50% of her own attack to all allies for 2 rounds. This was insanely good in the early game of Omniheroes. Katrina is still an amazing early game hero that will carry you a lot. She only really needs 7 stars because at 8 stars it doesn't really matter because the Protector synergy is pretty weak in the early game. So her active is Katrina summons the Emperor Dauntless Worship to fire at all enemies, dealing up to 600 damage, which is insanely high in the early game. Landing at critical hit grants up to 100% chance to deal an additional 50% damage. So she's a pretty strong hero in the early game that will deal damage and provide pretty nice sustain at 7 stars. At 6 stars, she's there to increase the limit of defense reduction, which is pretty irrelevant. She also increases the defense reduction herself. After dealing damage, there is 50% chance to apply 3 stacks of defense reduction. She just enables your survival a bit, but that's nothing really important. The important part is the freeze, so she can freeze enemies and freeze does stack. So you will be using her with Elisha in the early game, so you can stack a lot of freeze, and then she will provide you with the sustain from the shields, and then continue dealing massive damage while applying attack boost on herself, which further increases her shields, which scales of her own attack. So Katrina, overall a really good hero, only really requires 7 stars in the early game. You will be using her up to the mid game, I think, so she's not really a hero that's used in the late game, maybe in some Protector Ethereal lineup. I have seen few comps around that, but it's not really strong. So you will be using her even in some Dawnbringers trials, but it's really iffy and niche pick. So she's pretty much an early game hero and she's a really good early game hero. She pairs with Dorabella as well, so those two can go together in the early game up to the mid game, but the Dorabella does continue up to the late game even. Her runes are actually pretty great. She was one of the few heroes that I have gotten runes for first. Once the crit rate of all allies exceed 100% and every time Katrina takes action, she will grant 1 stack of crit boost to all allies. This was pretty insane in the early game, buffing your crit boost so your Dorabella follows even more. It was a really nice effect and I did get her epic runes in the very early game. Her legendary runes are alright. She will just basically increase the shield effect of the ally team by 50%. It's nothing ideal, it's nothing amazing, but it's okay if you want to get it. Again, you will want to run DPS runes because her shield scales of her own attack, and you will want to run the unique runes if you can afford it, but she's not really a priority, especially not over someone like Dorabella. So Katrina, early game, build it, up to the mid game, build it. You can leave her at even 7 stars, she will do her job, and pretty much you will bench her in the early game if you do not need more slots in something like World Arena or tournament teams. And the last hero for today is going to be Portia. Portia is a really niche hero and she's really great. She scales insanely if she has got her exclusive runes. For each stack of debuff on the target, Portia's attack increases her crit damage by 5% up to 90%. That's just epic runes. With the legendary runes that goes up to 300%, which is pretty insane. She has a really high damage stealing capability. I usually did run healing runes on her because I wasn't sure what was the meta when she was played with healing runes. I think it was in position 1 when there was a lot of HP on position 1, so I did run HP runes on her. Recently I got these runes, so I didn't bother rerolling because I don't really run her anymore. Although people do run her, I did run her a few times this season and she's actually really great. She has potential and maybe hopefully someday in the future she will be even better. So let's go over her skills. Portia attacks all backline enemies dealing up to 813 physical damage, and then you can amplify this with her runes, which turns out to be a really insane damage overall. So she has a really big damage and she's not to be underestimated, especially in the early game. Then her second skill is Portia attacks all frontline enemies dealing literally no damage, so nothing to worry about. Her ultimate is the real damage dealer in this case. Her first passive skill is at the start of each round, Portia summons a Wavebreaker, up to 4. The Wavebreaker inherits 50% of Portia's stats and attacks a single enemy dealing 50% physical damage. When the Wavebreaker dies, it will self-destruct, dealing physical damage to all enemies equal to 200 of Wavebreaker's attack. Now this is the fun part about Portia. So when she was used, she was run with a lot of attack boosters that basically increased the Wavebreaker's attack. And when Wavebreaker was destroyed, it basically did a nuke on the enemy team. Now this also happens in Dimensional Arena. I shared a short recently about it in the Portia Protector team or something named like that. So Portia still does this in Dimensional Arena and she's really great. In the early game, this will allow you to pass the Forgotten Lands, the fourth wave basically, which is survival, because the summons do count as the heroes, so it will ease up your survival rate in there. It also works in the Lost City for a while. So Portia in the early to mid game really great, even in the late game works in PvP. She is nowhere near Dorabella when it comes to PvE and clearing the bosses, but she's really up there in the PvP. You will not be using Portia in PvP if you're someone who's like reaching top hundreds, because at that stage you already have a really strong lineup and Portia might be one of the fillers in there. When Portia receives healing, the excess healing of 2% will be converted into attack. The total converted amount cannot exceed 40% of her own attack. So this was also one of the reasons I run healing on her. So whenever she would heal, she would convert it to attack, which was the reason for me running healing runes on her. As for the synergies, she has the same synergies as Dorabella, as the Arcane Dorabella, except the Downbringer, but obviously what I said for Dorabella also serves for the Portia. Really amazing, really great hero in the early to mid game and usable in the PvP late game. Definitely not a hero you want to bench in the early game, but you might bench her in the mid game for the PvE. And yeah, that's about it really. Do you need the unique runes on her? No, not really, because she doesn't do consecutive attacks, but if you can afford it, sure. But her exclusive runes are really nowhere near the priority. In the Dimensional Arena, those runes are unlocked naturally, so you do not have to worry about that. And that was it for this episode of the Build It or Bench It series. It's not anymore a weekly series, unfortunately, but yeah, hopefully you have been enjoying it and see you in the next one.